everyone. Hi, everyone. So I'm, as Brandon said, with the CU Johnson Depression Center. We are a clinic out on the Anschutz Medical Campus, and we have a team of clinicians that work with individuals, families, kids, all around primarily anxiety, depression, and bipolar, along with other mental health issues, but that's kind of the primary focus. So we serve as an outpatient clinic there, and then I get to go out and provide these trainings all around Denver and Colorado, kind of with this grand idea of increasing awareness and reducing stigma. Also up here is just a few resources. If you need more, if you have more questions, please feel free to ask me. I do want to note real quick that what Brandon said, the Cohen Veterans Network, we just opened that yesterday, and well, we had our grand opening. It is located in Greenwood Village and is probably the most beautiful space, mental health space I've ever seen. I wish I worked there. But they provide free mental health services to veterans and their families, which is pretty unique with the family piece. We have 10 clinics open right now nationwide, and they're expanding kind of daily on those. So if you know any veterans that are needing some extra support, or if you have questions about that, please let me know. There's also some information on them up here. Today we have about an hour to talk about mental health and suicide prevention, which is really a really short period of time for a very big and heavy topic. So again, if you have questions, need more information, let me know. Also know this is very broad. This is not, we're not getting kind of too deep into these topics because we would be here for a few weeks. So if you need more on a specific area, again, let me know. And please ask questions as we go if you have any. And yeah, take anything you'd like when you leave. So to start off, when we look at mental health, we look at kind of two categories. We have mental wellness and then mental illness. So when you think of mental wellness, what are some words or phrases or sentences that come to mind when you hear that? Anything? Yeah?
Integrated.
Integrated? Great. What else?
Balance.
Balance, yeah. Anything else?
Mindfulness.
What was that?
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness, yeah.
Resilience.
Resiliency. Confident. Great, absolutely. And what about mental illness? What do you hear? What do you think of, or what comes to mind when you hear mental illness?
Fearful.
Fearful.
Challenges.
Challenges. Great.
Dysregulated.
Dysregulated. Great, absolutely, yeah. And those are all things that fall into both of those categories. When we look at mental wellness, kind of this is where we all want to be, where we want everybody we care about and that we know to kind of fall into this, where we have this state of well-being where we recognize our own abilities, we have this ability to cope with the normal stresses of life, we're able to work productively, and we can contribute to our community. That's kind of our goal in life and what we want for those that we care about. What can get in the way, or what can happen, is that we can develop or have a mental illness. Issues here, key pieces here that I think are really important. This doesn't just affect one area. It absolutely affects your thinking, your mood, the way you act. And the biggest thing I think is that this piece that it interferes with the ability to relate to others and function day to day. So the piece there is it really interferes with our meaningful relationships, and it really can interfere with our daily functioning, our day-to-day activities that we do. Mental health conditions do not just come out of nowhere. We do know there are a bunch of different things that can contribute to mental illness. We know trauma absolutely can play a role in this, chemical imbalances. One of our biggest ones is family history. So not to say that if my grandfather had bipolar that my mom was absolutely going to have bipolar, but we do know that there tends to be some kind of trend around that where we do see mental illness kind of run in families. The issue with mental illness is that unfortunately most of our perceptions around it tend to be incorrect or misunderstandings. And these are the ones that I think are really important for people to really understand. And the first one I think is probably the most important because of kind of the state of how we are currently and in a lot of the violence that we see, is that a lot of times we just focus on their mental health issue, what was going on. And they absolutely could be struggling with a mental health issue, but what we aren't hearing is that individuals who have a mental illness are actually 4 times more likely to be a victim of violence. 1 in 4 individuals actually are a victim of violence within any given year. So it's something of just kind of changing our mindset and understanding to recognize that piece as well. Also, this idea that mental illnesses are diseases of the brain. So you hear a lot from people that don't have understandings of why would you be depressed? You have a great life, you have a wonderful husband, a wonderful wife, whatever it may be. You have no reason to be depressed. This is not something we just turn on and off. Just as we get diseases of the bodies, we can get diseases of the brain. So again, shifting our perception and understanding about that. And then also recognizing that all mental health issues are not necessarily lifelong. There are some that absolutely are, but regardless if it is lifelong or if somebody just goes through a bout of depression, that regardless of that, people can live very successful and very happy lives living with that or going through that. So this first little video we're going to watch, I think, does a really good job of talking around this stigma that we have around mental health, because unfortunately we treat mental health and physical health very, very differently. So we're going to watch a short clip on what it would be like if we talk to people who have physical health issues the way we actually talk to people who struggle with mental illness.
Listen, I know you're sick and all, but are you even trying to get better?
Hey, look at it this way. There's plenty of people out there that have it worse off than you do.
You need to stop focusing on all the bad things in life and just try to enjoy it. It's all in your head.
I don't think you need to be taking medication every day just to feel normal. Don't you think it's changing you?
Listen, you really just need to suck it up. Like, everybody goes through this and you're just feeling sorry for yourself.
Why don't you just go to the doctor?
I can't. My insurance doesn't cover the flu.
Oh, shit. Steven!
Hey man, that's broken. You need to see a doctor.
Seriously, I'm fine. I can get better on my own.
So again, even though it's a little bit of kind of a joke on it, unfortunately, those are a lot of the common things that are said to individuals who do struggle with mental health issues. So really in the mental health world, that's kind of something we're really striving for, and although it's a very uphill battle of looking at how can we have people talk about mental health the same way we talk about physical health. And the reason this is so important is because it's everywhere. We know that 1 in 5 adults struggles with a mental health issue. We know over 10 million people have co-occurring mental health and addiction issues. And a lot of that is due to coping and managing their mental health with these addiction issues. I think one of the biggest problems that we see here is that those who do struggle with mental health issues, over 60% of them actually don't even get services within any given year. So people are not seeking out those services even if they are struggling with something. And we'll talk about that a little bit later of what those barriers are and why that is such a struggle for individuals. It's more common than cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. And yet in the workplace, what do we focus on? We focus on how do we stay healthy physically. They have all these programs of challenges they have. Everybody has their Fitbit, trying to stay healthy in the workplace, which is great, and they've really done that to combat heart disease and some of these other things. But we're just starting to talk about mental health in the workplace, and a lot of workplaces are still really not doing that. Also, we know that about 50% of chronic mental health issues appear by the age of 14, and actually 75% by the age of 24. So we do tend to see these at a younger age. And one of the big issues with this is this delay between symptoms and intervention, and this is specifically for kids, is that it's usually 8 to 10 years. So if my kid who's 8 years old starts showing signs of anxiety, a lot of times we aren't properly diagnosing them. We're either saying, oh, it's just an 8-year-old, mean an 8-year-old, or not really treating it as what it should be. And he, in a lot of cases, won't be getting the correct treatment until he's 18 years old. So we see this huge delay, which is difficult, and there's not a great answer to this because a lot of things do overlap with what development does look like for kids as well. Other interesting things that we know that we only have 40,000 psychiatric beds in America, and we need 100,000 more. We also know that those who struggle with mental illness are 10 times more likely to be in jail than in any kind of mental health service. We also know that 20% of our youth ages 13 to 18 do struggle with mental health issues. And 70% of youth in state and local juvenile justice systems struggle with mental health issues. Along with that, 50% of students age 14 and older with mental illness drop out of high school. So we have a lot of issues, and another one is that we need 30,000 child and adolescent psychiatrists, and we currently only have about 9,000. So we have a lot of issues around this, and it's something that is not going away, unfortunately. So when we talk about mental health issues, there are some just kind of common warning signs that we may see. This is a very blanketed statement on this. And again, with these, you may say, I've felt all of this at work at one time or another, and that is completely normal for most of them. But with that, where we have concern around any of these warning signs are with those two areas that I mentioned earlier. One, where it's really affecting our meaningful relationships, and two, if it's interfering with our day-to-day activities. So I could, have really low energy and not want to go to work today, but I'll still get myself up, I'll still go. I may not perform great, but I'll still actually do that. Those who are struggling with mental health issues won't even be able to get out of bed. They can't even make that attempt, even if they know their job relies on that. So we do see it affect our performance. We do see a lot of withdrawing and avoidance. Isolation is a huge issue around mental health, and especially around suicide that we see. We can also see this come up as physical ailments, where there's stomach aches or headaches for no apparent reason. And then we have a big issue around abuse around drug and alcohol, which also interferes with some of our suicidal thoughts as well, or can contribute to some of our suicidal thoughts. Same with adolescents and children. There are some similarities, but there's also some differences. With kids, younger kids, we do see these frequent nightmares. We can see a lot of disobedience or aggression that wasn't common before, and a lot of temper tantrums as well. With teenagers, we see a lot of this too much or too little. So too much eating, too little eating, too much sleeping, too little sleeping. Again, isolation, we know this feeling of helplessness or hopelessness also can be a warning sign, along with drug and alcohol and suicidal thoughts as well, and extreme mood changes. And again, I know, especially for teenagers, people are like, well, that's my teenager every day. And that is, again, we know that is normal, but where they're really affecting relationships that have been meaningful to them, or they aren't doing the activities that they've always engaged in before. That's where we start to have concern around mental health issues. So we're not going to dive into all the mental health issues because we would, like I said, be here forever, but we are going to talk about some of the most common ones. And depression is one of the most common mental health issues that we have in the US. One thing with depression that is kind of the big standout of this is this persistent feeling of sadness or loss of interest. So we use the word depressed a lot, just kind of in our language, oh, I'm depressed or she's depressed. And we do all feel that sadness at one point or another. But again, we're able to get up, we're able to do things, we're able to perform. Where depression becomes an issue is where it's really persistent and again, really affecting our daily activities. So to kind of describe this in a more detailed sense, we're gonna watch a video put on by the CDC and the World Health Organization. They created what's called the Black Dog, or My Black Dog. They have a book on it, which is really great for kids, but this little video I think does a great job of really talking about depression, what it looks like and what we can do to kind of help others and help ourselves struggling with it.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learnt not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks, so it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants, so go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learnt that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
All right, so again, I think that actually does a really good job of talking about depression, which is a very big topic in a really short period of time, and gives us also tangible tools of what we can do to help others and also help ourselves if that's something we're struggling with. Another one that's very common, and actually the most common in the US, is anxiety disorder. There's a lot of different diagnoses that fall into anxiety disorder, but again, the big piece here is this persistent excessiveness, especially around fear and worrying. And another big piece here is this in situations that are not threatening. So a lot of times where somebody may have social anxiety and they don't want to go to a party, it's not that they don't know that it's not a big deal. It's just that they can't control necessarily what they're feeling or what's going on. And so again, a way that we can try to shift our own perspective of it's something that they don't necessarily not understand. They get that it's not that big of a deal, but it's something that they really do struggle with and are trying to manage on their own. Again, this can be really overwhelming, and it really can impact the way we interact with others and where we go, how we act, and what we do in our daily lives. This woman put a YouTube video together around anxiety disorder, which I think did a really good job of really showing what anxiety looks like and really feels like. So we're going to watch a short clip on her and her experiences that she's had.
From the outside, it's easy to think that somebody's got it all figured out. Because my hair is curled and my cheeks are intentionally flushed, I must not have a care in the world. As if it were expected for my demons to be worn like a scarlet letter pinned to my chest. And they assume if you cannot see it, then it's not really there. As if pain does not exist unless you're bleeding or slung in a cast or staggering with a limp. But sometimes the most painful demons are the ones they can't even see. So we learn how to smile, how to grin and bear it, because nobody likes to talk about the tough stuff. Hell, I don't like to talk about the tough stuff. I have anxiety. It feels like every cell in my body is moving so fast that my veins are blurry. That despite the constant metronome of my heartbeat inside my ears, it's like listening to a spastic drumline. It feels like bees in my ears, like a broken white noise machine playing all of the sounds at once. And I don't even realize I'm gritting my teeth or cracking my knuckles or rubbing my forefinger against my pinky or twisting the gold band on my middle finger, holding onto myself like I'm the only lifeline bridging the gap between reality on my own 2 feet and the atomically loud abyss of noises and sounds and feelings of fleeting rushing through my veins. And I'm avoiding eye contact. Not because I'm not listening to what you're saying, because I'm listening to the sound of my own voice, hoping that through your ears you can't hear that it's 2 octaves too high and on the verge of breaking because my palms are sweating and I somehow forgot to speak with anything behind my words other than insecurity. My anxiety feels like fire. Unexplainably hot and rash and frustrating as I nod the inside of my cheek as if the solution to this feeling is buried between my teeth and gums. It feels like drowning, but it feels like burning, and it feels like forever. I imagine my feet moving with trails of dust behind them like those cartoons because somehow it feels like I'm moving faster than the 60 seconds they've allowed in a minute. All the while, I'm just playing catch up on the stopwatch. And it doesn't add up like it did in high school mathematics. I can't carry the 1 and find the square root of the problem because most of the time, there is no problem. There's no life or death situation. There's no rhyme or reason. There is just feelings, and I'm feeling all of them at once. Some days are better than others. Some days are worse. But they're just days. And I've got more where they came from.
All right, so again, I think she kind of does a good job of talking about all the different sensations and feelings that can come up with anxiety, and she again highlighted how most of the time there is no problems, but she's just feeling everything at once. With both depression and anxiety, these are obviously both very treatable diagnoses, and there's a lot of different ways to treat them, whether it's talk therapy, medication management, group settings. There's a lot of evidence-based programs and treatments out there for people that struggle with both of these. Any questions on depression or anxiety?
Would you say anxiety was the most common?
It is, yeah. Yeah. And it is the I think it's the, hold on, let me, sorry. I believe there's a high percentage of kids, I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but it's the highest diagnosis definitely with kids especially. Or one of the highest, because there's also ADHD. So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This is something that we do, or you hear a lot being diagnosed with kids, but we actually see a lot of diagnosis within young adults and even adults as well. With ADHD, a big piece of this is this inability to control behaviors. One thing that I think is really important about ADHD, because you hear a lot of times, well, there's just so much overdiagnosis of this, kids are just being put on medicine all the time and it's masking who they really are. We have issues with all mental health issues around medication management, but there's also a lot of underdiagnosing with ADHD as well. So we haven't hit a perfect mid spot, and we'll talk about why that is here in a little bit as well. But knowing with any of these that there may be some overdiagnosing, but there's also a lot of underdiagnosing with these. The right fit, the right medication, the right therapy for that specific individual, because there is not a blanketed treatment that is going to help every single person. But with ADHD, I think what's really important here is that these kind of things, this inability to control behaviors, these problems with attention, with hyperactivity and impulsivity, this isn't just a kid or an adult struggling one day at work or even within a week at work. We see these being persistent issues with 6 months. So that's kind of a big key piece that we do want to make sure that we're understanding and paying attention to, that having a tough week or a couple of weeks for kids is normal. It's really when we see this for a very long period of time. And again, with kids, where we see this a lot is, a kid's acting out in class. And so teacher will say, please stop doing that. Most kids will be like, okay, I'm going to get in trouble if I do that again, and are able to control that. With kids who struggle with ADHD, this piece of inability to control those behaviors, so they know that they're going to be sent to the principal's office or they're going to get in a lot of trouble. And that's why school settings tend to be pretty difficult for kids who struggle with this.
I think with ADHD, the problem is that you sort of
I'm going to try to rephrase this because I'm sort of going on a tangent.
What just happened?
What was I saying? I misbehaved a lot as a kid, but I didn't mean to.
The natural environment of a classroom is very non-conducive to somebody with ADHD. Just like this quiet room, you're sitting at this table, a bunch of other kids are all doing their work. It was almost like it's sensory overload, like everything is coming at you all at once.
I would be trying to focus on this teacher, and then all of a sudden I would snap to it again, and I had missed half of what the teacher had talked about. It was like you're high or something. It's kind of similar to being high.
One of the side effects of ADHD is a sort of an inability or at least tough time staying still, concentrating, focusing on day-to-day tasks.
I feel like my thoughts are sort of on like a carousel in my brain, and it's going in circles, and each thought stops for 2 seconds in front of my eyes. I can barely grasp it, and then it's gone.
The third day I was at BuzzFeed, I was taking some safety test with my friend, fellow producer here, Caitlin, and I'm already lost on the packet. I look over and Caitlin's answered the first 10 questions already. And it's just that's the story of my life is looking over to my friend and being like, how the hell did you just do that?
I have been on some form of medication ever since I was 13.
I stopped taking medication for me because I just didn't like the way it made me feel. They curbed my appetite, I was losing weight.
But the medication provides me with clarity.
When I'm not on my medicine, it feels like the smallest tasks are really overwhelming because I can't visualize and focus on the simple process.
I have to plan things out, I have to write everything down or else I forget. I don't advocate that everyone go off their meds if they don't need to. For me, that was something that I felt I wanted to do.
It looks different in everybody. I would just wish people were a little more sensitive with the verbal assumptions they make.
I just wish people believed it was real. My ADHD is the realest thing in my life. I can't reach out and touch it, but I can feel it.
All right. So I think what she said at the end is really important with all mental health issues, is just that believing that it's real, because we don't see it necessarily, and that really is dismissive and not empathetic or compassionate for those who do struggle with any mental health issues. And just like the other ones, ADHD is absolutely treatable. As they kind of said, some did medication, some kind of did their own kind of thing trying to manage it, but we do know people are very, very successful living with ADD and ADHD. And then two other ones that are common, not as common as the others. We know bipolar disorder. It's these kind of dramatic highs and lows in a person's mood, energy, and ability to think clearly. So we have these kind of high mania emotions, and then we drop down into these low depressions, very similar to what depression is. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. This is usually the result of a traumatic event. One thing to note with PTSD is that we see symptoms usually within 3 months of the traumatic event, and they are very persistent symptoms, like these intrusive memories, avoidance of certain situations or things that bring up memories of that. There's a lot of dissociation where they're kind of this fly on the wall, kind of looking in on a situation, and a lot of hypervigilance as well. We do know a lot of Americans do struggle with specifically PTSD as well as bipolar, but again, both of these are very treatable. Bipolar, there's medication management as well as some really great therapies that are out there, and really great organizations that work around bipolar specifically. And then PTSD, I think we always think of veterans when we think of this, but we also know that there's a wide range of individuals who do struggle with this. Veterans absolutely do, but we know kids do, adults who have never been in any combat situation do struggle with these issues. And again, very, very treatable. A lot of different evidence-based programs out there around both of these disorders. Any questions on any of these? With all of them, one of our biggest issues is that we have a lot of barriers in getting the right treatment or help around them. So regardless what mental health issue a person may be struggling with, we don't have a single test that says, you've got this and this is what your treatment's gonna be and you're gonna be better in a week. We can't do that, unfortunately. It'd be wonderful if we could. So we have a lot of issues and really diagnosing what exactly a person may be struggling with, especially around kids, and then also getting them the right treatment. So there's issues with, is the medication, are they able to metabolize it well? Is this something that fits well with them? Or the side effects don't bother them too much? If medication isn't the issue, have they found a therapist that specializes in what they need? Do they even like their therapist? Do they like talking to that person, meeting with them on a regular basis? So there's a lot that goes into this, and you can imagine if you're struggling with, let's say, depression, and you're having to go into a bunch of different clinics, having to try to see who is a right fit, what works, what doesn't. We see people give up a lot of times because this can be a difficult process. We also know there's issues with coverage, specializations. I've worked down in Southeast Colorado a lot. And a lot of people have to drive up to Denver, which is a 3 to 4 hour drive, to get specialized care around mental health. That's asking a lot out of somebody. So Denver Metro, we probably have quite a bit, but you get outside of that and it's a really big issue. We also know affordability is always an issue. So a lot of times mental health is out-of-pocket pay, which gets really, really pricey, unfortunately. There's limited treatment options, even if you do have coverage, and unfortunately, there can be declining of coverage as well. Another huge barrier is the stigma that we've talked about as well. This was with kind of employers. They did this study with a workforce, and they found that about 70% of them felt that they were treated differently of those who struggled with mental health issues. 25% felt that those who were close to them actually understood what they were going through or felt that they were understood. And 8 in 10 of them said shame and stigma actually prevented them from seeking treatment. So we really are needing to change the way we even just talk about this or approach mental health in general, because that's a lot of times what is one of our biggest barriers, is people not feeling comfortable even saying, I need to make an appointment with somebody because of the way we talk about it. So ways that we can help around this. And this sounds really simple, and some of it is simple, some of it's a little bit more complex, but one of the biggest things that we can do is genuinely listen to somebody. Say, tell me what's going on, what's happening. You are not going to fix things by saying, well, but you got this great job, or everything's great in your life, why would you be feeling this way? Showing them all the great things in their life is not going to make their depression or anxiety just go away. You tell me, gosh, that sounds like you're going through a lot right now. And just listening to everything they have going on is really important. Talking about what kind of issues or barriers that they are coming up against, and trying to figure out what are some solutions that work for them. Not solutions that work for you, but solutions that are helpful for them. What would they actually do? Would it be helpful if you went to the appointment with them? Is that their barrier? They don't want to go by themselves. Are they even just struggling to pick up the phone? Is that something you can maybe do with them? Avoiding labeling and diagnosing. I don't think we purposely do this, but just like when I call the doctor and I tell them I have the flu, they say, well, tell me what your symptoms are. And then I tell them throwing up or I have a fever, whatever it is. That's me diagnosing myself that I have the flu, and I could be right, but that doesn't help in my treatment. So what really is helpful is really separating the person from what you think it is. Oh, this kid has ADHD. Tell me what you're noticing in them. Well, they're not able to sit down in their seat for very long. They're acting out a lot. Those are the things that when we communicate in that way, we have a much better approach and ability to get them to the correct help and support that they may need. We also want to make sure that we're promoting self-advocacy, and self-care is huge. And with self-care, what I think is really important around this is, yes, for the individual who may be struggling with a mental health issue, but also for their supporters. I so often hear people say, I'm the only one trying to get help for this person. I'm exhausted. I don't know what to do anymore. I've kind of hit a wall. It's really important that you get more than just yourself involved with that. Learning more around any of these topics I think is really, really helpful. NAMI is my favorite website to learn more around mental health issues. You can go to any kind of disorder and click on it, kind of learn the common symptoms, common treatments, and what you can do to support somebody with that. So I think that's a great place to learn, but there are some other great websites. On this sheet up here, we have a few of them. And then knowing what your resources are in the community, who you can call, where you can go to. At the end of today, I will be forcing you all to put a phone number in your phone, because it is a great way just to say, I don't have anywhere else to go, I don't know what else to do, who can I contact? And Colorado Crisis Services is one of those numbers that helps with mental health issues, domestic violence, bullying, suicide prevention. They really cover all of it, and they are a local resource that we have here. No matter where you are, you can contact them. So I will come back to that at the very end. Any questions on any of this?
What was the webpage you mentioned?
NAMI, it's NAMI.org. It's the National Alliance of Mental Illness. So they're a great website. It's an easy website to navigate and learn more. All right, so we're gonna briefly touch on suicide prevention. So I do a lot of suicide prevention training. So if you're wanting more, if you have more questions, please reach out to me. So with suicide, the reason that this is an important topic to talk about is that on average, we know there are 123 suicides every day. One way to think of that is to think of a commercial airliner crashing, everybody on board every single day. The reason that stands out to me is because whenever I do see that, you just see how tragic it is, you see what a ripple effect that has on everybody involved, and that's happening every day with suicide, we just aren't hearing about it. We do know that firearms account for about 51% of suicides. That's followed by suffocation and then overdosing. As I said, 90% have a diagnosable mental health disorder. So to clarify that a little bit, that does not mean that every single person who's died by suicide has been professionally diagnosed and in treatment. It does account for those people, but it also accounts for the individuals where their behaviors and their actions prior to their death would lead us to believe they did struggle with mental health issues. Veterans do comprise of about 20 to 22% of our suicides, which is obviously way, way too high, and something that there's a little bit of a focus on or a spotlight on, I think. But really the important piece here is that we're getting our veterans the right support and help that they may need. Colorado, unfortunately, we're not doing a great job around suicide. We rank ninth in the nation for highest suicides. Last year we lost 1,156 people to suicide, and that has been on a steady increase since 2009, and we are not seeing a drop in that. I think disturbing, especially for parents, is that this is our #1 leading cause of death for ages 10 to 14-year-olds. It is our second leading cause of death for 15 to 44-year-olds. So around this, we say, well, what are the schools doing? Why aren't they fixing this? And although schools do play a large role in this, it's really our communities as a whole that play a role in suicide prevention. And part of that is really telling our legislation and really advocating for your schools and your communities of what needs to be done. How do we create more programs? How do we talk about this more so that we can prevent it? So right now there is no mandate on what schools have to talk about around suicide prevention. It's really a district to district basis, and we know funding is always an issue. So there are great programs. The best one that's out there right now is called Sources of Strength, that really talks about a lot of the things that contribute to suicide. It's peer-led, it's strength-based, it's just a great program that a lot of schools are starting to use, but it's really up to the school what programming they do want. All right, so when we look at risk for suicide, we do know that men die by suicide at about 4 times the rate of women. However, women make 3 times the amount of attempts, and that's due to means. Men tend to use more lethal means. Our highest rates, we do concentrate a lot on kids because they are a very vulnerable population, but when we look at this kind of statistically, our highest rates are in adults 45 to 64 years old. That's followed by the 85 and older age range. The 85 and older is a lot of times due to the loss of control, feeling a burden to others, and losing loved ones around them as well. I was also reading a really sad article not too long ago about this, where when people become older, kind of 85 and older, there's kind of just this assumption that they should be sad. They're old, they're just sad. And so a lot of their issues go undiagnosed. A lot of treatment is not being put in place because we just have this assumption that you've lost people, you're in a nursing home, this is kind of typical. One thing I also want to note that this does not include the assist to die kind of stuff. That's completely separate when we talk about suicides. We also know that 7 of our 10 suicides are white males. That does tend to fall into this 45 to 65 age range. The issue around this is the group that's probably the hardest to get to the table to talk around mental health issues. There is a great website out there called Man Therapy that is really trying to address this issue. There's a bunch of stuff on here. There's a sticker here that says, "Shit can turn to shit when you're in the shit." So they, I think, do a really good job of really talking about mental health and issues around mental health in a way that's a little bit more relatable for men. They really focus a lot on veterans, and they focus a lot on first responders as well. If anything else, you should check out their website. It's really funny, and they do a good job of talking about this. So there are things that are out there trying to address this. So when we talk about suicide as similar to mental health, we have a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions about this. These are just some of the most common ones that we have. So these are actual facts on them. So a lot of times what you hear with suicide is, well, we shouldn't talk about it. You could put it in somebody's head, or you're going to make things worse. What we've actually found is that the more direct we are in talking about suicide, the more we have the ability to actually prevent it. So we know that if I'm worried about a friend, in most cases, if I say, hey, are you thinking about suicide, or have you thought about suicide? That in most cases, that actually opens up that ability to have conversations. You cannot put suicide in somebody's head by simply asking them about it. I know that was something I was told growing up all the time, so that's something that kind of has stuck with a lot of people, and is thankfully very untrue. We also know that most people communicate their intent sometime within the week of an attempt. So really what that means is we see warning signs in a relatively short period of time of when a suicide happens. And we actually have that down to even within 24 hours that we'll see warning signs and an attempt is made. And then we do know suicide is the most preventable cause of death. So there's a lot that we can do, and we're going to briefly touch on that here in a second. So when we talk about suicide, there are warning signs around it. So in the training we do, that's a lot longer. We dive into these a lot more. But you can kind of break them up into 3 different categories. You have verbal, behavioral, and situational. So verbal can be really straightforward, or it can be a little bit more indirect. I want out. I don't want to be here anymore. Those kind of things can indicate that somebody may be struggling with suicide and would make you want to maybe ask some more questions. Behavioral, these are just a few of them, but we see some of this social Disconnection, as I said earlier, isolation plays a really large role in this. So somebody really isolating themselves. You know, a kid used to be with a bunch of friends, always kind of hung out with them, not wanting to hang out with them anymore. Somebody at work used to, you know, talk with their coworkers a lot, now just kind of retreating to their office, not talking to anybody. So social disconnect along with hopelessness, helplessness, so low self-talk, low self-worth, those kinds of things. You can also see this as giving away prized possessions. With adults, we do see this with pets actually pretty often, where they're trying to find a home for their pet before they die. Also with adults, we can see this with putting personal affairs in order, where they're making sure their family may be set up financially, or that things are kind of set for those they care about after they're gone. And then drug and alcohol abuse, unfortunately, play a very large role in suicide. So if we know somebody who's struggling with that, if there's any heavy use or abuse, that's something we want to tune into. Situational clues, so these are things that may happen in our life. We do see this with kind of physical illnesses or serious terminal illnesses. We see an increase with HIV/AIDS as well as MS patients. If I see some of these things in a friend or somebody I care about, the first thing I want to do is ask them, are you thinking about suicide? A few things with asking the question. The first one is we don't want to wait. A lot of times I'll hear, well, let me give them the weekend or a couple, you know, a week or so to let them cool off, let things kind of settle in. As I said earlier, we see warning signs in a relatively short period of time of when an attempt happens. So if I'm concerned about somebody, I just want to make sure I'm doing that, asking that question. We obviously want to be doing this privately. We're not doing this in front of a bunch of people or around their family necessarily. I think it can be really helpful one-on-one, asking it in a genuinely open in a private setting. There's a lot of different ways you can ask the question. You can do check-ins. Are you unhappy? Are you really unhappy? Are you so unhappy lately you've been thinking about suicide? You can name whatever you're seeing. So when people are as upset as you seem to be, when people say things like you just said, they sometimes wish they were dead. Or you can just ask them, are you thinking of killing yourself? Or are you thinking of suicide? It's really easy for me to stand up here and say that. It's really difficult in the situation. I would not say it ever gets easy to ask somebody if they're thinking about suicide, but it is probably one of the most valuable things you can do if you have that concern. Two ways that have been proven to be not as effective when asking the question. The first one is saying, you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? You can imagine any time we ask a question that way, we really do shut down conversation. And unfortunately, that's a way that we hear it asked a lot because we want them to say no. So it's really framing it so they say no. And it comes from our own fears and discomfort, but as you can imagine, that does shut down that conversation. The other one is asking if they're thinking of hurting themselves. Hurting yourself and killing yourself are two different things. So we do want to be as direct as possible when asking this. The next thing we want to do is, again, listen, which we talked about with mental health stuff. But especially around suicide, you are not going to fix this. With whatever is going to come out of your mind, it's not your mouth, it's not going to just make that go away out of their mind, unfortunately. So what we found to be the most valuable is just say, tell me what's going on, and genuinely listen to them. Saying really supportive things like, we'll figure this out, I'm here for you, I care about you. Those little kind of statements just to let them know I'm here and I care have a huge impact on somebody, instead of us saying, but you just got into this great college or you just bought your dream house. They obviously know those are things that have happened in their life, but they're still struggling. So we want to make sure we're just letting them know I'm here, I care, and let's get you some help. And then you want to get them help. So getting them help can look like a lot of different things. I think one of the best things is obviously you going with them to do that. So whether it's calling a crisis number with them, going to a walk-in clinic, going to their doctor, their therapist, but you actually doing that with them. There are some resources that you can have on you at all times that can be really helpful. The first one is our National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's a 24/7 call line. No matter where you are in the US, you can call this number and talk to a mental health professional who talks about suicide all day. Their number is 1-800-273-TALK. You can also text them at 741-741, which kids like to do a lot more. Kids actually know about this number. There was a rap song written about them by Logic, and so a lot of kids actually know this number now. They also utilize the text line a lot more than the call line. The second number is the Colorado Crisis Services. Colorado, we're pretty lucky to have this. It's a 24/7 call line. They also have 24/7 walk-in clinics all over the Denver metro area. They even have beds available at times. They even have mobile units that will come to you if that's deemed appropriate. They're a wonderful service. They deal with all kinds of crises. The crisis is up to you that they will deal with. Their number is 1-844-493-TALK. Yeah, 1-844-493-TALK. So those are resources that no matter where you are, what's going on, you have the ability to contact them and get an individual to the help that they may need. They're a great resource to be able to do that. All right.
Well, can we give a huge round of applause?
Thank you.